We apologize for doing something that I do not enjoy, which is cutting music while it's playing. As I promised, we have 3 segments on the show. We start at 3 and finish at 6 p.m. every Saturday. And now I'm joined by my guest for the last segment, which is called World in View. I'm joined by Nina Huang as well as Melissa Fen. I hope my pronunciation was apt. Ladies, welcome to Dialogue Sessions with Toki Mohoto on Capital Radio. How do you do?
How are you?
Hi.
I'm glad to be here.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for honoring the invitation. As is the case on our platform, we try and look at everything that happens on the global stage, but most importantly, get experts or people who have a lived experience of the phenomena we're debating and have them tell us what it is exactly that we're trying to unpack and understand better. And today, as is no other different day, we are looking at what is emerging as xenophobia, hatred, or any form of discrimination that is directed toward Asians, in particular people who are either of Chinese descent or have some relation with China. Again, we're going to be talking with the topic and looking rather at, is it really about hate crimes, or this is another veiled attack at the economic supremacy of China, or we basically clutching at straws? Thank you once again, ladies. By way of starting our conversation, I usually ask my guests to make a brief intro as to who they are and what their career focus is, and then we zoom into the crux of the matter.
Okay. My name is Melissa. I'm studying towards becoming a therapist. So I currently have my honors in psychology and bachelor's in criminology. I'm also a part-time artist.
My name is Nina Huang. I'm currently based in the United States. My whole career, which lasts about a decade long now, is devoted to help foreigners and especially Americans to have a better understanding of China. I did that through writing and programming.
Great stuff. I think there's been a lot of mixed reaction where China is concerned. Some people celebrate what it's done, looking at from the time of Chairman Mao to what it is today, an economic powerhouse of the world, competing with the US, obviously, and also looking at what Chinese people have exported by way of either their manufacturing sector, their culture, or even what we see in visual media. I often joke and say, the first time I ever interacted with a Chinese person was looking at movies by Bruce Lee. That's all I knew about China. Unfortunately, I did not make a distinction between Kung Fu or karate, but I knew how to make the moves. And of late, we are seeing an emergence of xenophobia. What has been, in your experience, encounters with this phenomena?
So because COVID, we mostly work from home, so I don't really go out very often. But I heard from a lot of my friends who had really unpleasant encounters on the street. The other day, a friend of mine who is also in New York City, she sent me a video of a person on the subway calling her and say, "Go back to Asia." And I also heard terrible stories and read stories on the news that some Asian women's hair was pulled by a person on the street. Yeah, horrible stuff.
Scary stuff. Yourself, Melissa?
Yeah, so likewise, I've been indoors mostly, but I actually had an incident where I was quite sure I was actually coughed on, so I wasn't sure, if that was, targeted at me on purpose. But there was also a lot of incidents in our community where, there were confrontations where people were just innocently walking in the mall, and then, people were also coughing at them or just telling them, you cause a virus and all these horrible things.
I want to zoom into that assumption or myth that has become a reality for some people and perhaps a justification for meting out certain injustices against Asian nationals. When you look at COVID and how it happened and what emerged from Wuhan and what became public discourse, there was a lot of untruths linked to China particularly and how this developed. But now when you zoom it into individuals of Asian descent and how now they've been vilified, do you feel that there's justification in how people are now seeing Chinese people generally?
I don't think it's justifiable because first, I don't know, it's for sure that the origin of the virus is from China. I didn't read the WHO report closely, so I don't know like if they concluded that the virus is indeed originated from China. The second thing is, even if it is, we're all like all the patients, all those who get infected, even within China, they're victims. Like, how can you like blame a victim for the cause of it? They're not the cause of it.
Definitely.
Yeah, I actually saw that there's a lot of studies being done later on that show that you actually can't even be sure that the virus was originated from China because there are a lot of different strains and all of that. And you know, like you said, we're victims as well. It's strange how people have dehumanized us to the point that they didn't realize that, you know, China, they were affected firsthand, like the worst. I remember when Italy, you know, had their wave, everyone was so sympathetic and everything. I was like, well, where was that sympathy for the Chinese, you know?
Right, exactly.
And it started before COVID already. You know, it's just this time it was the virus, but before that, you know, it's our eating habits, which also fed into this whole COVID thing. And then just being different, you know, there's a long history of that's really directed towards us. So I just feel like there's always just this excuse.
Definitely. You can jump in, Nina. I know you had a point there.
Oh yeah. So I definitely agree with Melissa. Like I just feel virus is the enemy, not the people who got it.
I want to zoom into this. I don't think many people, I think most of us consume news possibly from popular channels. I think if you're in America, there's NBC, there's APC and all these various platforms. If you're in South Africa and you consume what's globally happening, you'll either look at the BBC, you look at CNN, you look at Al Jazeera, you look at, what's the other favorite channel of mine? Russia Today and all of those. And I do not think many people would have arrived at the fallacious conclusions they did had President Trump not exacerbated the notion of COVID being a Kung flu, quote unquote, or a China virus. Do you feel that had he not inflamed people and incited a sense of discrimination against Chinese, the extent of xenophobia would be at this degree now?
Yeah, I agree. Of course, I think President Trump's rhetoric definitely unleashed the hatred among people. That's for sure. And I feel like it's just like when you were in, like, I'm just gonna take children for example. If you're in a preschool, when you have a bad behavior, when you make nasty comments, you're gonna get stopped. You're gonna get corrected because that's not nice. That's not how you want to treat people. But what if the teacher started to do that? Yeah. Then all the children will just follow the teacher and be nasty about each other. That's really a bad environment, I would say.
Definitely. Melissa, yourself?
Yeah, I definitely agree as well. Like I said, you know, there's already been pre-existing negative stereotypes towards us Chinese or Asians. But then you see, so the stereotypes where we're always seen as barbaric or somehow being more backwards or having weird cultural norms. And then what Donald Trump has done, he's taken this a step further. He's completely dehumanized us. Not only are we to blame for the virus, he's basically saying we are like the virus. So what do people do with viruses? They want to eliminate them. So I feel that he's basically encouraged people to actually take violent action against us. Like the shooting in Atlanta. The guy himself says it's not racially motivated, but there was actually a Facebook post from him that said that he, wanted to eliminate, you know, a lot of Chinese people because of the virus or something like that. So, yeah, I think he's definitely gone and exaggerated all of the hostility that's been boiling for years now.
And I wonder though, in recent history, what we deduce in terms of statistical analysis, we hear that from 2019 up until 2020, there's been over 3,900 recorded cases of hate crimes against people of Chinese origin or descent, right? And I wonder, do you feel that this is largely concentrated in America or this is happening the globe over too?
So Melissa, I don't know where are you based, but because I mostly read news that's happening in the United States because I'm here. But yesterday when I was doing some research, I noticed that there are anti-Asian sentiments in Europe, like France or Germany. So I don't know. What do you think, Melissa?
Yeah, I'm based in South Africa. So like I said, we did have incidents as well. And like you said, I also read that there are a lot of European cases as well, like in England, France. So it's definitely universal, I think.
I wonder though, to what extent is the persistent power tussle between China and America on an economic playing field, perhaps also adding fuel to fire in what's currently seen as xenophobia?
I think it definitely plays an important role in it. But this is like the power, like the competition. We know that for a decade or even more years to come, there will be competition. And the competition started early on. It's not just started in 2019. But we don't see, like at least I didn't see that much hatred, that much hate toward Asian Americans in the United States before the COVID. I worked for a local Mandarin TV station here before. And of course, all our reports were very centered on what happened to Chinese or Chinese Americans here in New York City. But I didn't recall we did so many reports on Asians being attacked. If there are any, that's all what we did. We would cover it. But we didn't, I don't remember we covered that many anti-Asian events before. But nowadays, you can read a news about a certain Asian, not necessarily Chinese national citizens or Chinese Americans, but Asian Americans in general being attacked every day. So I do think COVID contribute a lot to this, but that's not to say being competitors. I feel like the competition absolutely is a cause of it, because when you look at what happened in the 1990s and 1980s with Japan was in fierce competition with the United States, there were also anti-Japanese sentiment.
I'm seeing a trend here. At some point, us in Africa, we became familiar with the term Afrophobia, which obviously was a derivative of xenophobia. We've seen also to a certain extent and degree what people term Islamophobia taking shape in Europe. And now we're seeing xenophobia taking place in primarily the United States and other parts of the world. But I've never heard of Europhobia or Amerophobia, if there's such a term. I wonder though.
No, sorry.
Continue.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Like, I think the politics between China and America definitely plays a part. That's why I've educated, people that it's very dangerous to spread, a lot of unfounded claims against the Chinese government, even though people think, well, it's just politics. I'm not attacking your culture. I'm just attacking the government. I think that, a lot of the time we become collateral damage. But I think at the same time, there's a lot of gray area. It's hard to differentiate between politics and just this general inability to accept diversity, because like you said, whether it's Muslims, whether it's Africans, people always see our differences as something negative or something to, get rid of, rather than something that adds flavor and something that's like very complementary of one another. I think that without these differences, the world wouldn't be, so advanced right now.
Definitely. We know, for example, if you speak of America, it's a cultural melting pot, right? There's almost all ethnicities and almost every other nation you can imagine there. And I wonder if the statistic says now the injustices against Asians are largely instigated by African Americans. Is this also a play at racial tension between the two, or is there really merit to this? Nina, maybe if any experience that you've heard of?
So I follow Twitter closely these days on any anti-Asian news coverage. And then I read the comments. A lot of comments are from Caucasians here, and then they would say, oh, so now you know who did this. It's mostly, like you said, African Americans here who themselves are like not doing well economically. So then they would say, now you found it's not white supremacists, then you just stop reporting on that. So there is definitely a lot of discussions, a lot of argument among different racial groups. And then what I read on Twitter, some people would say, in the less developed communities, there is also fight and argument between African Americans and Asian Americans, because basically they're fighting for the same resource.
Yeah, I feel it's more of a socioeconomical thing. So maybe people who are, more impoverished, like you said, feel more desperate, or they have much less exposure to other races. And then also, obviously, there might, be the same people who are more, more violent to begin with. I mean, like I said, the guy who did the shooting in Atlanta, he's a white guy. I feel, it's racism spans across all races. It's not really. And then the interesting thing as well is, even though it may be Black folk that committed some of these crimes, they're still consuming Western media. Like, I find it very interesting that here in South Africa, we didn't have a lot of the Black folk actually, being violent towards us. So I was wondering if it's because on SABC, there's less Western media. So I think that's just a very interesting thing to consider.
Yeah, and also when I read the news, actually, the New York Times did a very good report, lists the major assault incidents that's happening around the country. And I look at them, most of the incidents happened in either New York City or the West Coast, like San Francisco, when there are a large population of people with Chinese or Asian heritage. So I'm wondering, because the target is right there, so it's easy to find them, and so I don't know if that's true with South Africa. I don't know like the population of people with Chinese heritage there, but that could also, it's just there's so many Chinese people here. So when you put them together, you see there are a lot of incidents happening. And also I agree with what Melissa just said about the socio-economic factor, because at the end of the day, people are unhappy because of the COVID. They might lost their job, they cannot walk freely on the street anymore. So their life was impacted very heavily because of COVID. And at the end of the day, they want to find somebody to blame on, and then Chinese people become the target.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, together with the encouragement from Trump, then I feel like it's just, adding fuel to the fire.
Definitely. I want to look at the complicity, or the role rather, that the media play in either fanning the flames, as it were, or positively profiling cohesion that takes place between both African Americans and people of Chinese origin, right, or Chinese heritage. Is there a role that media plays in exacerbating or ever emphasizing certain things to push a particular narrative?
That I'm not sure, but what I'm concerned is when you do a lot of reports on this, then people who were not necessarily planning to do anything was inspired, and then they follow the bad examples because that's a way for them to get the hate out of their mind. So I just thought people might follow or might take similar actions more just because they read or they saw what is happening on the news. It's all about Asian being victimized, Asians being attacked. But nowadays we see more and more about law enforcement, like who committed hate crimes were sentenced like certain amount of years. I would like to see more report on that so that people will think twice before they do something like that.
I agree with that.
Continue.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I
Continue.
also think that internalized racism has a big part to play because, again, it's this, I think with Westernization especially, the whole entire world is kind of competing for this kind of, this praise from the West to just, kind of act the same or think the same. And then it just feels like anyone who deviates deviates from that, then they're painted as bad or negative. So yeah, I think Westernization has a lot to play to the point that even minorities within themselves, like I'll be honest and say even Asians, not all of us are united. There's so many different ethnicities, and I feel like there's just this constant fight to just be, hey, take note of me, in terms of getting attention from the West. And sometimes it is about survival, because right now the US is the superpower. So I think it's natural for people to also just feel like, well, if they set the stage for what is a model citizen, then you'll want to do that. And then instead of being united and being cohesive within different minority groups, we're also competing against one another.
That's an interesting view that you're advancing there. Also, I just want to share this. In South Africa, not so long ago, Dr. Harvard was recently appointed as a member of parliament, right? She's Chinese, and she is a member of the ruling political party called the African National Congress. And there was a huge, big hullabaloo that was created around her to say, since a Chinese national is now in government, it means China is going to colonize South Africa. China has come to take over our resources and almost anything and everything. Contrary though, in America, you have a state senator, a congressional woman who is from Texas. Her name is Sari Kim, who's been spreading rather unsavory views about people of Asian origin. She's quoted to say, people from China must go back to China and they must take their COVID back to China. Juxtapose the two in South Africa, where South Africans are saying, Black South Africans particularly are saying, why appoint a Chinese person in government? And the Chinese community is celebrating to say there's now representation, right? In America, though, you've got Sari Kim, whom some may assume is going to be fighting the cause for equality and social cohesion, but she's spreading opposite rhetoric. How do you manage the fine line between the two?
So Sari Kim, she is not a congresswoman. She's a candidate. She is a candidate in Texas who was doing her campaign trying to win the seat. She had, so I think it could be campaign rhetorics. The other is I think she lost her endorsement from GOP lawmakers because whatever she said is not what the GOP lawmakers stand for.
I hear you. And yourself, Melissa, when Dr. Harvard was appointed to parliament, what was your reaction and what were some perceptions that you saw advancing after she was invited into parliament?
Yeah, so as you said, I myself and much of the Chinese community were very happy because, we've been here in South Africa for like 4 generations now. So we see ourselves as being South African like anyone else. But it felt like a lot of people out of the Chinese community, like you said, were furthering this rhetoric that, oh, she represents China and she's coming to, conquer Africa. And again, I just feel like it's that internalized racism and also that Western Westernization, Western media, always just pushing that, that rhetoric about China trying to take over the world. They aren't seeing us as Chinese South Africans, which are separate from China. Honestly, the politics in China have nothing to do with us. We see ourselves as South African. So, and then contrasting with the other candidates in America, she's Korean. So, again, that's internalized racism where even Asians themselves aren't very united sometimes, unfortunately.
Scary stuff indeed. I wonder though, to what degree do you feel the state organs in their multiple facets can enter into an arrangement with either people who are prone to commit hate crimes or those who are victims to look at rehabilitation of sort, which one is both preventative and also assist Asian communities now, wherever they are, who may be living in fear, to enjoy equal rights and protection as does some nations in America, for example?
So sorry, can you repeat your question? I don't quite understand it.
No problem. I'm saying you've got government, right? In the case of any country, if you have a citizen or someone living there, government has duty to protect that person, right? But I see that there's a degree of disproportionality where some nations within America enjoy more rights and protection. I'll make an example, for example, the Jews, right? They also had been vilified. They also enjoyed a few attacks, but they enjoy a degree of protection that perhaps Asians envy too. To what degree do you feel that government may play a bigger role in ensuring that those who are seen as victims and perpetrators are also managed equally and there's equitable distribution of protection to its citizens?
Yeah, so from what I read, most of the people who were attacked, they're not necessarily Chinese nationalities. They are Americans. They are Americans with a face like me. So I don't think the Chinese government will want to intervene because they're not the citizens of China. But I did receive WeChat messages from, like, they have like the press release sort of thing, just asking Chinese nationals to be careful in United States. That's from the consulate. The information is from the Chinese consulate here, asking the Chinese citizens to be more careful because there are anti-Asian crimes happening here. Basically, what it does is just to ask us to be more cautious. But I don't see real actions were taken, trying to intervene. I don't see that because right now I think what's out there, like the events, the people who want to speak in the public are mostly Asian Americans because they're part of the country. And when you say go back to China, how can they go back to China? They're not even from China.
Yeah, I think it's up to the US government itself to protect minorities of all groups. I think Asians are unfortunately left out a lot when it comes to the struggles of minorities. I feel like we're very invisible. But like I said, these hostilities towards us have started a lot longer before COVID. So yeah, it's really up to the US lawmakers, policymakers, and the different sectors of the government to really help with that. And actually, I remember there was a call from different Chinese rights activists and activist groups in US calling to actually, I think it was to introduce a new bill or something like that protected Asians, but it was rejected. So I think there's definitely, I feel like there's no deliberate attempts to protect us as minorities.
Yeah, I think the discussion here right now, a part of it is still about in the mainstream media. It's not mainstream, but among lawmakers. Is it real hate crimes or is just, thefts, robbery, it can happen on any race. It's just happen to be reported more. Now it happened on Asians. There is also a discussion like this, but for Chinese people, Chinese citizens, over the years since the epidemic started, a lot of my friends, because they felt it's so unsafe to be here, and also they lost the faith of the country, because you see how much hate people have toward Chinese people or Asian Americans, and you see sometimes like how evil, how bad that people can behave when we are facing this crisis. And they totally lost faith in the United States. And a lot of them are very highly educated, very successful in terms of a career in the United States, but they decided to go back.
Wow, quite scary. Whilst we're still in the US, we read in some statistics that there's at least over 40 million people of Asian descent who currently live and work in America, right? Do you feel to a degree, perhaps with your own experience also, Melissa, in South Africa, do you sense that to some extent, there's some level of jealousy or fear to say, if we're now seeing more Chinese in my country, quote, unquote, perhaps they're coming to take over local territories, and I, as an indigenous citizen, may perhaps end up becoming dispossessed or becoming internally displaced?
Yeah, I definitely get that feeling. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
I definitely get that feeling a lot. No, but again, I feel it's ignorance to our history here, because again, you know, we've been here for generations. But yeah, there is this, again, there's this idea that there's so many of us coming over, you know, what are our intentions, our motives? I think now that China's gained more power, then again, there's more doubts about that. And I think it's understandable to some degree, but again, I think it's also up to maybe us, the Chinese community, and it's up to people to educate themselves on, you know, the very diverse history and all the different races that contributed to it. Because I feel, again, it's also like, it's like this after effects of the apartheid, you know, there's just this, it's all of these things, although at the surface it may seem political, I feel that deep down, there's still this deep-rooted fear of diversity.
Yeah, so because New York City is like all of people from all over the world.
Yeah.
So I don't see the fear in New York City. What I saw is the retail business welcome Chinese visitors, the higher education system, they welcome Chinese students, overseas students, because the tuition fee can supplement the fund, I guess, for their local residents. But I don't know, like in the Midwest or in other parts of the United States, a large influx of Chinese visitors. I think it can scare people, local people, just because it's a totally different culture. People behave very differently from what locals are used to. It could be unpleasant, but that's why I think it's very important to help Americans and even people all over the world understand a different culture.
Definitely. I think culture as a currency is oftentimes misunderstood or misused. It depends who has attention of that culture at that moment. On a positive note though, or maybe let's laugh a bit, what are some stereotypes that you've encountered and strange things that have been attached to you as a person or as a race group, which you've had to either debunk or often laugh off?
It's not stereotype, but I remember when I just arrived in New York City 10 years ago, people started to speak Japanese to me. I'm like, why do you assume? I think back then, because it's a while ago, back then China was not, China's economy hasn't taken off. A lot of Asian visitors, I guess they were from Japan or Korea. Then people started to speak Japanese to me in Times Square area in a very friendly way. So you just like, oh, I cannot even blame you. So
yourself, Melissa?
I think being from New York, maybe a lot of people are more open-minded, so maybe you have less experiences. But with me, something that's persistent is I've been asked if I eat dog and if I eat snakes, if I eat all these weird things. And yeah, I remember I was volunteering at a shelter for kids, and they were all like just bombarding me with these questions like, oh, do you eat this? Do you eat this weird thing? I'm like, where are you getting these ideas from?
You know, I thought it's funny because first I took my Caucasian roommate to have dim sum, and I invited her to eat chicken feet. And then the other thing is I feel it's so absurd because French people, they eat liver. I read books about French culinary, but I don't hear anybody laughing at French people eating liver.
Yeah, I think it's ironic, especially here in South Africa. You know, a lot of the kids who are asking me these questions, they're African kids. And like you said, chicken feet, a lot of African people also eat that. There's a lot of, you know, yeah, liver, kidney, things like that. We share a lot of common things, actually. And it's just so interesting. Again, I don't know if it's Westernization, now teaching that all these different things are bad when we actually have so much in common.
Exactly.
Definitely. As a parting shot, seeing that time is now officially against us, what are positives that people often misinterpret about Chinese people that you feel need to be overemphasized?
I feel that people thought Chinese people are all the same, but I don't think that's the case. They all say, and also I feel like they will say Chinese people are brainwashed because of the party, but you know, people think differently. You just don't, you cannot think the whole, the whole country, the people of the whole country think the same way. Of course not. And nowadays, especially, you can get information from all over the world. Then just don't assume the person you know is the whole race you read about on newspaper or website.
Definitely. Your parting shot, Melissa?
I think a lot of positive stereotypes are actually kind of negative in some way, is the fact that, you know, we're very smart and then we just naturally do well. That's, even though it's positive, it's actually dehumanizing because we're still individuals, we're still different. And maybe our hard work is going to be overlooked because of that. They don't know that we struggle as well, just like everybody else.
Definitely. Ladies, it's been a learning curve for me, and I'm certain our listeners too are the more better because of the insights that you've shared today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your hectic schedules and agreeing to honor the invitation to have us learn more about the phenomena called xenophobia and what it is that you have seen or encountered as either lived experiences or reports on the phenomena.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. I'm going to be playing a couple of songs as an exit. I'm going to be starting with DJ Snake. The song is called Taki Taki. I'm going to follow with Davido, with Lil Baby. The song is called So Crazy. And lastly, I'm going to be playing Sauti Sol, a song called Melanin. Have a great day ahead, and thank you so much, and continue spreading the positivity.
Thank you so much.
Cheers and bye.
Bye.